Hello. Um, Thursday the 13th of March is not today. However, BBC Radio 4, the briefing room, I'd not heard of the briefing room before, to be honest with you. But it was brought to my attention by our friend Andrew that there was a piece on there about the crisis within our schools and why is that happening with regards to send. And all of us listening to this and listening to me understands that there is a crisis. Um, but when I was listening to it, it did annoy me a little bit because I think even the people that possibly policymakers, but are relatively knowledgeable, seem to be missing the point. So they talk about the amount of changes that has taken place in terms of the diagnostic assessment and how that has impacted on the number of people needing special educational needs. And autism and social, emotional, mental health are the two main contributors for the incredible increase in the need for SEND and indeed an educational healthcare plan. And they were talking about the funding not being able to keep up, the resources, the schools not getting what they need. The schools are desperate for children to have educational healthcare plans because of the funding it will bring into the school on top of the potential of the £6,000 that they can apply for before an EHCP is sought. And thankfully, somebody did say that the the money that is going for the £6,000 isn't necessarily being used in the right way, and I would agree with that. And there's a lack of understanding. I think there's a lack of understanding for us parents as to how that can and should be used and when. But I also don't think the schools really understand how it's used. So that was a little bit of a trigger for me. And then they started talking, and I'm saying a lot because I'm going through my head. This is getting really embarrassing now, saying See, you can get easily distracted with doing things like this, and I'm not going to redo it because it's just showing that when you do try to think, other things come and into the area that distract us. The reason I was getting annoyed is that they're saying that the diagnostic threshold has changed and it's easier to get an assessment because what was typically deemed as autism was more childhood schizophrenia back in the 70s, where Lorna Wing sort of said, no, that's not quite right. There are a lot of other children being missed here because of their lack of understanding of social cues and their inability to communicate properly. And now, though, what they're trying to say is it's gone way the other way, and everybody bar the local shopkeeper can get a diagnosis in so many words, and it wasn't quite as that, but it was. They were saying it's a lot easier for a diagnosis, and maybe not everybody should have a diagnosis. I agree that not everybody needs that diagnosis. However, I think the way that schools and the education system is set up drives us to the need for a diagnosis, because we need to have an understanding of why are we not coping in school. And I've said for a long time, it's not our autism or our ADHD or our dyslexia that gives us the need for additional help. It's the way that we are communicated with. And this is what this article on the BBC Radio 4 programme I feel missed. If our schools were to deal with the needs of our children, then the need for an EHCP almost disappears, because we're dealing with what does our children need. And the reason I can say this is last week alone I was in 3 different settings. One was a college and 2 were schools. And they all sort of dug their heels in and sort of said, no, the child has to comply with our rules and regulations. That's not what we can do. We've offered you this. We are providing reasonable adjustments to this. But the problem was the reasonable adjustments that were being made were not ones that the children could work with. There were adjustments, but they weren't reasonable for the child. They were reasonable for the school, and for the school to be able to document that they had offered an adjustment. And in all intents and purposes, if you're looking from the outside in, it looked like a reasonable adjustment. But for the child that it was being administered for, it was never going to work. They couldn't work with that adjustment. And stopping short of them saying, you are choosing what you want to work and what you don't want to work, it's basically what they were saying. They were saying that this child or these children were making the decisions not to go along with the adjustments that the school were putting in place. When you point out to the school that actually they're not making a choice, they just are unable to do that, and we need to look at something that will work for the child, it then becomes a little bit of a battle again. So I mentioned about potentially for one child putting in place an online alternative provision where the child who cannot get into school, not that he doesn't want to, he's desperate to have an education, he wants to get into school, he cannot get into school, nothing to do with that school, it's just school settings full stop. And it's his anxieties of being around people, and what comes with that. And at this minute in time, I don't know what this young man's main issue is, other than he doesn't like being in places where there are people. So is it a school problem? Oh yeah, because they've got lots of people, and nobody's really acknowledging his struggles within the school. And the reply to this from the school was, we are we have robust systems in place that we can help this child, and we are not going to fund any online alternative provisions. When I challenged, it then came back, we understand, etc. However, our financial decision is we are not going to pursue that this financial year. So maybe next month I can try again. I think I'll get the same answer, but who knows, because the financial year they can't use that excuse. But the things that we're asking to put in place, we know work. And a lot of the stuff, the majority of the stuff that we ask to put in place doesn't cost anything close to £6,000. And how do we get this information across to these people? Because they're looking at this crisis, but I think they're looking at it from the outside in. How do we talk to them about the inside out? And the only way they can do that, for me, is they need to talk to us parents. People need to start listening to us, not as we are moaning. We are giving them the solutions, but they're being ignored. And I think they're being ignored because schools and education settings feel that they are losing a grip. If we look at I don't know how it was. I was got in late one day last week, and my wife was just watching drivel on television. Whilst I'm not in, she'll watch drivel just to the sake of it because it's nice and easy to watch, and she'll accept it. A lot of it is drivel, and oh my goodness, it was a school program. The name has gone out of my head, and in terms of school program, it was a drama, soap opera type thing. We had it way back when I was growing up. I think in my or I had grown up, but certainly in my late teens. Grange Hill, I think it was. I think it was Grange Hill. Was it Grange Hill? And it was something like that. And this particular episode really interested me because it was on about special education. No, it wasn't on about special education. It was on about reasonable adjustments. And the majority of children had exploded into, the majority had adjustments or reasonable adjustments. And this new head disagreed that there should be that amount of adjustments within the school. And they highlighted about the children that were abusing the system. And for that particular program, it really did highlight that there were children really abusing the need for additional needs. And I think that was purposely done to try and highlight into people's thought processes that if you have a reasonable adjustment, it's an excuse. It's an excuse not to go to school. It's an excuse not to do certain exams. It's an excuse not to do this, that, or the next thing. And it's taking away the real need for our children. And yes, it was a drama. Yes, it was doing there. But I think politically it was designed to try and shame people into sort of saying, no, you can't have reasonable adjustments. I'm sure it was empowering schools to sort of think, no, we will get you to do what you want, what you need to do, what we want you to do. You will not dictate to us. And for me, our children aren't dictating. They are communicating with us saying, I am unable to learn in this environment. Please help me to learn, but I need you to look at what I can do to learn and how can you put that in place. And if they listen to us, there's a lot of parents out there that have gone through the process, have gone through the fight, me being one, that if you do change things, our children will thrive, they will stay in education, and they will get you the results that you're looking for as a school. But there's a fear. I haven't really got my finger on the fear yet, other than the heads and the senior leadership team want to sort of say, we are in control, you are the child, do as you're told. If you are a school, a head teacher, a Sanko listening to this, please reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to get my head around this, because what is simple, and the amount of parents, and I'm talking hundreds of parents I talk to that say, why can't the schools see this? My answer is they can, but some schools don't want to. I'm not talking about teachers. I'm talking about schools. I'm talking about senior leadership teams. If we can change the views of the senior leadership teams, our schools will change. If we can change the views of certain politicians and the government policies to sort of say, yes, there is here. Let's start looking at it from the inside out. What is it that child needs? What can we do to provide that? There was a thing called Every Child Matters. That seems to have disappeared. I think it's in the background somewhere. But every child does matter. And the stuff we're asking for is not a far reach. So let's listen to it. I'm going to put the link. You'll have to sign in or register to the BBC Sounds. But the link will be in Packed Family for you to actually access should you want. There's 3 or 4 different parts to it, and I'm going to be covering them. So yeah, have a look, and please let me know Am I right? This is just my thoughts. This is me getting angry. This is me in my soapbox. But for the amount of families I am talking to and helping, this is a real huge issue that we are struggling with. And if people go on to the Radio 4 and talk about this and miss the main things, how are we going to put it right? Let me know your thoughts. Thanks very much. Bye bye.